anyone had suddenly decided to stand behind the car and be run over as I backed out of the driveway. All things clear. I slowly put the old red and white Ford station wagon into reverse and crept out into the country road that ran past our house. Putting the car in first gear and being mindful of Mother's ever-present beady eye, I looked back at her standing there, her hand shading the said malevolent orb and her lips moving in what I was pretty sure were not words of praise on my driving ability. Then, intimidated by the thought of what she'd do if I burned rubber, I sedately went forward at a speed designed to strike terror only in the heart of a decrepit snail. But as soon as I got to the highway, zoom, freedom, whoopee, look at me, I am an adult. I am almighty, eat my dust. I can drive as fast as I want. Whoop, whoop, whoa, whoop, 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 eesh, oh. It was here, there in our little village of Blue Hall, Ohio, that I had a most amazing epiphany. It dawned on me that God worked in the course of human events because of prayer. They are just taking, thank God, the brakes were an inch from the side door of the weird joint in the town, the old Bottle Inn. I knew for a fact that prayer works. It wasn't my own prayer that worked because, quite honestly, as I thought I was going to crash into the building, prayer words were not the words coming out of my mouth. No, my epiphany on prayer occurred because I finally realized I had never understood, or rather, I had misunderstood one of Mom's quirky testimonies of faith, a saying that I now knew for certain she's been mouthing as I drove away. God watches over babies and fools. God watches over babies and fools. That's what I thought she always said. God watches over babies and fools. And she'd always shake her head as she said it. I remember sometimes she'd say it with a soft compassion rarely seen in her normally cool, knowledgeable eyes. That was how I saw her eyes as she said her phrase one morning ago. She was for the first time leaving home to work as the only able provider of our family. She stood for a moment in the doorway and looked back at us. She said it in such an odd way, with a small intake of her breath and a sigh of resignation as she left behind an ailing husband and a goofy little sister in what I thought of as my competent 11-year-old care. God watches over babies and fools. I remember wondering why she would say such a thing about Daddy and my sister. But most unusually, she'd say it mumbling the words with a kind of self-fulfilling shaking of her head that seemed to be an order to God. Lord, you know and I know what's going to happen. And since it's out of my hands, it's going to have to be up to you to deal with it. And now at 16, still shaking from how closely me and that station wagon had come to being unwilling gate crashers at the Bottle Inn, I knew that was exactly the way she must have been saying it as I pulled away from her just a few moments earlier. I also knew that I had never really understood her words. She wasn't making a statement. God watches over babies and fools. She was saying a prayer. God, watch over babies and fools. Thank God I wasn't free. Thank God I wasn't almighty. Thank God I was simply the result of prayer. God, watch over babies and fools. A prayer spoken and a prayer answered. A life saved. An epiphany. God, watch over babies and fools. And for the first time, I clearly understood the prayer and just as clearly realized I was too old for the first category and overwhelmingly qualified for the last. Either way, Mom's prayer was answered. God, watch over babies and fools. And you know, God does. And you as Pathfinder leaders and adventure leaders know that very well, don't you? For you get to see the babies and sometimes the foolish. Sometimes we are the babies and sometimes the foolish. And at that point, my friend was not safe to follow, was she? But if I told you that she was now a spiritual director, that she's been a chaplain, a policewoman, has done some comedy, and now does spiritual directing, you would know the growth that happened as she became safe to follow out of her mother's prayers. God, watch over babies and fools. There is a story that I want to share besides that kind of reminds me that even we as adults need God's guidance. The day was hot, even early in the morning, and a boat ride on the Niagara River sounded like the perfect prescription for a cool off. The children had ridden on the river before, so they were not unfamiliar to the roar of the falls, and they were expecting it. But what they did not realize was that they were not below the falls where they thought they were. They were above the falls. And they were also in a very dangerous situation. They were quickly reaching the point of no return, and it's the point where the water is shallow, rushing and rock-filled, just waiting to shear a boat that would come near those rocks and send it hurtling over the falls. Their boat driver friend, unfamiliar to the river or the area, discovered that the sheared pin had happened. He tried to restart that boat, but no avail. The life jackets were put on in terror, and then the boat tossed the three out into the Niagara River above the falls. The older sister was thrown to the American side, where horrified onlookers tried to make a chain to rescue this screaming youth. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the falls, the Maid of the Mist was steaming along in the churning waters when a passenger noted an orange life jacket bobbing in the water. The captain took the boat off course at the begging of the passengers. Both of those youths were rescued, though the driver of the boat did not make it. And 1 week later, my brother and I got to meet both brother and sister and their parents there in Niagara Falls. The parents were drinking heavily, and it seemed to me in my youthful eyes that they didn't pay much attention to what had happened. They wouldn't talk about it. And it was a terrible experience to have gone through. Very difficult to talk about. What a traumatic thing. The young woman rescued at the edge of the falls by a dentist and a whole bunch of other people, because I don't know if you know how hard it is, but in the falls, I'm going to just lower this mic just a little bit if I can. Maybe I can't. In the rush of the water, the current is so strong that it would take a lot of people to pull in a youth. But she was rescued. And the little boy had a head injury, but he was fine. But they really weren't fine, were they? Emotionally, they weren't fine. They had had a traumatic incident that happened to them. It was never talked about within that family, and through the years I wondered what happened to those kids. Because when we visited their house, there were beer cans everywhere around the house. And my young mind said, I wonder if they're going to make it. And what my parents did when we stopped is they had bought a set of Bible stories. On the way, we were visiting in Indiana when that all happened, and we were on our way back to Massachusetts, and my parents had said, we want to get acquainted with those kids. My dad was a pastor, and he said, my heart is just longed that he saw this little tiny note in the newspaper about it. And he said, we've got to look them up. So he took them a set of Bible stories, and we left it with them. I don't know if those Bible stories ever got read. I don't know anything. But here's what I know, that years later, not all that many years from now, about 3 or 4 years ago, I saw an article by the little boy, now an older adult, who had gone over the falls. And he wrote about the trauma of his life experience, because it was never dealt with. It was never touched. It was never talked about in their home. It was never talked about. The parents put a silencer on the lid of it. And I'm thinking it was because there was first some irresponsibility. The person who was in the boat had been drinking. They had been drinking through the night. They had been partying together. And the kids were the ones that had said, here's the entrance to the lake. But they were just little children. And in that inebriated, partial inebriation, the driver of the boat paid attention to the children and let the children be the directors. Isn't that what Pathfinders is all about? Kind of helping the kids direct their lives? Not to be the directors yet, but to be helpfully directed? The parents had not been safe to follow. The driver of the boat was not safe to follow. He wasn't a safe leader. He got in above the falls. I'm sure there were warning signs. The children didn't notice them, but the driver of the boat should have noticed. No boats beyond this point. There are signs there on Niagara River, and there were before. We as leaders need some safety in our abilities to lead. We need to be safe to follow. So I want to think about this morning a story in Acts 15:36-39, but we won't go there yet. I'm going to tell it first. Mark was young, hot, tired, and maybe homesick during a long mission trip, and he left at his first opportunity in the town called Pamphylia. The call to evangelism and mission service had pulled on his heart, but he couldn't stick it out. He complained and he left. But that call to evangelism, that call to ministry was still in his heart. So he signed up for another trip, another mission trip that would lead to evangelism and service. But his past supervisor and mentor, struggling with his own demons, backed off. So imagine the discussion. The mentor supervisor is a veteran returned missionary visionary, and his co-worker argue about the mentoring. He's not fit for the journey. He's been too complaining. He's not mature enough. He won't ever make it. The ministry that we're doing is too important to tie up with someone who might slow us down. I've given him his last chance. He's just a mama's boy and a deserter. And the mentor's voice rises. I'm putting my foot down, and he's not coming. You and I need to go on alone without him. The co-worker, Barney, replies, I'm not staying if Mark can't stay. And they split up. So let's read the passages there in Acts 15, 36 to 39. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back and visit the brothers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. Barnabas wanted to take John Mark with them, but Paul did not think it was wise, and Paul and Barnabas had a sharp disagreement. So sharp that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Silas, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the brothers to the grace of God. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Now we first find Barnabas the leader, the co-worker, in Acts 9. Paul has been struck down in Damascus and comes face to face with God and a new call. Nobody trusts Paul. Why? Tell me. Why didn't anybody want to trust Paul? Because he had persecuted the Christians. He was a murderer. He went to kill Christians. But there was one person. His name was Barnabas, right? Do you know what Barnabas means? It means son of encouragement. Wouldn't you love to be called a son and a daughter of encouragement as a leader? And it was Barnabas who made the difference. He took Paul into the leadership and he said, Paul is changed. He has changed. We've got to have him as one of our leaders. But for Barnabas, you as Pathfinder leaders will come across kids, youth, children of God, who are lost, who are mama's children, who leave camp because they needed to go home. They were so homesick. They leave the Pathfinder group. They might not make it on the camporee. And maybe others will say, they can't come back. And you will be the one, the daughter or son of encouragement who says, let's work a little more with them. Let's lead them a little longer. Let me mentor them a bit. Well, the beauty of this story is that son of encouragement, Barnabas, mentored Mark. Mark was the one who wrote the bookmark of the Gospels. Talk about a trust. We here would be missing the basis of Gospels if it hadn't been for Barnabas, the son of encouragement. Barnabas loved John Mark. And he said, I know he can do it. I know he can become a leader. I know we can trust him with the gospel. Because he was a son of what? A son of encouragement. There's no title I would rather have than being a daughter of encouragement, the chaplain of encouragement, the pastor of encouragement, the Pathfinder leader of encouragement, the teacher of encouragement, the adventurer leader of encouragement, the counselor of encouragement. Can you imagine anything better? And God calls us to that. My friend Lou is an encourager now. She's been through breast cancer. So she's done breast cancer support groups. She now has a brain tumor growing in her brain that's inoperable. And yet she has chosen to be a daughter, a leader of encouragement. The young man I told you about that went over the falls, who didn't have guidance, who didn't have that loving encouragement, met a pastor somewhere in his adult life. He described the debauchery he lived in, the broken homes that he influenced. And then he said, then I met Jesus. Because someone stepped in the gap and gave him some encouragement, strengthened him, and he became a Christian leader. You and I are invited to that place of encouragement, to that place of leadership. Is that not what Jesus did for us? He gives us courage, does he not? He leads us, men and women and young people, to the foot of the cross and says, I died so that you might live and have life more abundantly. We sang about it this morning. Rejoice in the Lord always. We sang it, behold what manner of love the Father has given to us. And so today, I don't know about you, but I would like to commit myself as a leader to be a daughter of encouragement. Who would like to stand with me to be a son or a daughter of encouragement? God calls us to be children of encouragement. In a world of discouragement, in a world of crisis, God calls us as leaders to be sons and daughters of encouragement. Shall we pray? Father, I thank you for the gift of your Son given to encourage us. I thank you for the book of Mark that reminds us that even though we may have left a missionary journey that you called us on at one point, you sent someone to encourage and strengthen us, to give us tools for leadership. And as here and there together this weekend, the classwork, the opportunity to visit, the stories, the shoulders that we stand on, as we hear those stories, may our shoulders be strengthened so that we may stand in that gap as sons and daughters of encouragement, with your strength and the strength of others. In the history of the Pathfinders and adventurers, I think back of Elder Minchin, who colored my life, of many others through the years, my parents, friends, even patients that I meet, pastors. Many of us have been touched by men and women who have given us an encouraging step along the way. And so God, strengthen us to encourage and strengthen those that we are called to minister to, the Pathfinders and adventurers, the early teens, the master guides, as they do their work. May we be children, sons and daughters of encouragement is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for that message, Linda. Really appreciate it. Just a reminder, lunch is at 12:30. If you still do not have a schedule and if you like one, come and see me. But we'll see you at lunch and then we'll just follow the schedule. God bless you. Have a blessed afternoon.